with big companies, big pressure, continue to grow year after year, big teams to manage, structures to optimize, staying competitive. It's a challenge on a big scale. But the smaller companies that are more founder-led, and often if they're bootstrapping or tighter for cash, they're every dollar, every activity, every decision really, really matters. And then branding and marketing become integral with the leadership team, and everything kind of attaches itself to it. And I find those companies, the brand and the marketing can be way more useful because everything is authentic and everything is built on top of it, rather than somebody launches something and then they try to tell a story because they think it's going to sell product.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, filled with marketing and leadership tips on launching and growing your business with your host, Deanne Mora.
Today on the podcast, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ron Szekely. He's a former CMO for notable brands like L'Oreal, Rise Kombucha, and Keurig, and was awarded Marketer of the Year by Marketing Magazine. He's currently a growth coach and founder of Boss 360, a growth system for entrepreneurs. I'm truly looking forward to our conversation today, Ron. Welcome to the podcast.
Great. Thank you for having me, Diane. It's great to be here.
Well, hopefully I didn't steal too much of your thunder in the introduction, but let's start with your story. What was the path that took you from corporate marketing to where you are today?
Great. It's kind of a non-traditional path in the sense that I started my career with big businesses. So working for a lot of multinational corporations, initially with L'Oreal for many years. So right out of school, I joined their management training program. So while I was actually studying, I did summer after summer after summer with them. And then I started full-time right out of school. And they kind of push you on a fast track management growth path where they keep you out of your comfort zone, and you get exposure to a lot of different businesses and brands over the years. And I did that for 4 years part-time plus 14 years full-time, and had a lot of fun. Definitely kept out of my comfort zone, learning a lot. But then at one point, I made the decision to leave L'Oreal actually and go out on my own. Started my own agency together with a partner. Brought on some fun brands to work with, and after a few years, I got an opportunity to go back into the corporate world. Sold the agency and ended up in pharma for a few years on an interesting mandate, and then eventually in at Keurig Dr Pepper in the beverage space. Had a lot of fun there. Worked on a few startups, and then I ended up falling in love with smaller founder-led, kind of more entrepreneurial companies. And I worked directly in a few of them, and eventually moved on to coaching several of them. So now, since about 5 years, I've been working full-time as a business coach, working with a variety of companies, mostly small to mid-size, helping them build their business, their brand, their team through strategy, execution, and culture. And have recently brought on a few additional coaches that work with the same system that we call Boss 360, Boss being your business operating system, and the 360 because it's quite a comprehensive framework that we use. And so that's my work background. Before that, I didn't give the backstory, which is I started off in business and marketing, and when I graduated, I then went back to design school. So it's an interesting kind of path where I start in one direction, and then I went back because I was in university for marketing. When I graduated, I went back to CEGEP and studied design.
Oh,
And then I worked with big business and then decided to go to small business and then now on my own. So kind of I go where the passion brings me and have loved every phase of it.
Right. I also went through a corporate career before launching my agency, but did not go back. But I think when I was in corporate, I used to kind of go back and forth between like client facing and then more on the, internal marketing strategy and then back to client. And I found that was really helpful in terms of, from both perspectives, really being able to bring that understanding and empathy to whatever I was doing. So how do you feel that going back and forth between corporate and SMBs has really helped hone your perspective on strategy?
Well, number one, it gives me a great appreciation for both big businesses and smaller businesses. They have their own challenges and dynamics. With big companies, Big pressure, continue to grow year after year, big teams to manage, structures to optimize, staying competitive. It's a challenge on a big scale. But the smaller companies that are more founder-led, and often if they're bootstrapping or tighter for cash, they're every dollar, every activity, every decision really, really matters. And so they are they're really in need of doing things right, because when a small business gets off track, it can very quickly spiral downward. And when it spirals downward, it means people don't want to work for you, people don't want to buy from you. It's hard. You don't have enough money to fix anything because you're constantly, you have to lay people off and you're running out of cash, and the whole thing starts to become um, emotionally toxic, emotionally painful, and not fun at all. And you're like, how do I fix this? And on the flip side, when things are going well, it's like this virtuous spiral where everybody wants to work there. They've got money, everybody wants to buy from them. The brand is growing and they're having a ball. And small businesses, it's amazing. You can have two equally great, competent leadership teams and founders, but they kind of get on the wrong track. They make a few wrong decisions, and next thing you know, if they don't pivot properly, they're on that wrong sort of downward spiral, and that's no fun for the founders and the employees. But it even starts to like in their personal lives, it starts to transpire, and it just that's where really my passion for working with the smaller founder-led companies comes from, is I know the difference it can make when you're kind of just made a few wrong decisions and you need to flip things back onto the right track. That dramatic difference between that upward spiral of growth versus that downward spiral of trying to hold things together, and being so short-term focused that you can kind of never get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's a really timely conversation right now. I obviously don't want to get political at all. That's not what we're about as a podcast, but clearly we're in the middle of some challenging times with the economy right now. And, you know, small business, I think, is really bearing the brunt of a lot of that. And business owners might be tempted to either pull back or maybe just kind of jump really quickly into lead generation activities. But let's talk about starting with brand as a foundation and what that means.
Perfect. So just to your point about the economic times, one quick point on that is if people can not panic, but see both the kind of the opportunity in the situation, because when things are changing, there's always opportunities that emerge. And so you don't want to be complacent for sure, because things are going to switch, whether it's investments in new areas, whether it's AI technology, whether it's, some companies going bankrupt and customers looking for a new brand to be part of. There's opportunities that exist. And so if you can be kind of open to those and excited by those, and then within your own business, not being complacent, being, really paying attention to what are we doing here and what's working, what's not, and not neither reacting too quickly, but being ready to pivot. And if you pivot, pivot with one foot, like keep one foot planted, like what's working, what stays the same, and just like move a little bit. Don't lift both feet off the ground and start running in a new direction, because like you're not going to be able to build off of something that you've already got. But it could be very exciting times, especially for that entrepreneurial mindset. Um, where they're often more courageous and opportunistic and ambitious and optimistic than the corporate world. The entrepreneurial world is generally people who have this can-do attitude, so they're going to see the opportunities in these situations. So I have confidence that they're going to come out through the change positively if their mind is in the right spot, if they don't panic and they stay energetic.
When you raise,
But I know that was kind of tapping into your
sorry,
first comment, but I didn't
we'll
answer
jump
the
into brand in
question.
a second, but because you made a really good point that I don't want to let go of here. So, when you talked about being nimble and you did mention AI as well, and I think we need to also reflect on that for a moment that, I think there's an opportunity right now for SMBs who embrace AI because corporate just by nature moves more slowly and it might allow SMBs to take on more market share. What are your thoughts on?
I totally agree with you. However, I believe they actually might be the ones that move the slowest, and I hope that they don't. And the reason I say that is because I do feel that the big organizations that might be, all plugged together on Microsoft 365. They've got good kind of partners that are going to help usher in something through their systems. And, these big companies that are going to go after the big companies to help, bring their software solution to life, they may be in a decent spot to at least get started and to try a few things, put some systems in place. Then you have the very small kind of solopreneurs who are just going to do their own thing. They're going to be using ChatGPT on the side and finding these kind of like single operator solutions that they can create amazing businesses with almost like no staff. We see many examples of those emerging. And then you have the small to medium size where they might be like 20 to 100 people, where they don't have like the full support of the Microsofts of this world that are going to help usher in a new wave of technology. And they're too big to kind of let everybody just do their own thing. So they're trying to figure out, how do we begin here? How do we, number one, security. If we start allowing people to be putting their thoughts and ideas and questions even into some kind of AI, is that information going to find its way outside of our system where we don't want it? And obviously that can be figured out, but it can stay inside, but that fear is there. So they almost are afraid to get started. And then when they do, they know how people can individually work with different AI platforms, but how do you integrate that? How do you do things that we can kind of all share in this new knowledge base? And there's a great paper from Microsoft that came out 8 days ago, and a project that I'm working on as well, where you're really thinking about AI as employees. So the same way that you would kind of onboard a human who comes preloaded with a skill set and a kind of framework and attitude, let's say, and then you train it, and then you give it specific tasks, and then it interfaces with all of the people in the organization. It takes requests, it challenges, it shares information, like the same way a human needs to be brought into an organization. An AI agent needs to be the same. Like you need to bring an agent into your organization that is pre-programmed with what it needs, the foundation, trained on your specific environment, brands, projects, documents, and data, and then has a way of interfacing with the people that it needs to work with. And it needs to feel similar to a human. It needs to be like talking to its talking to the boss, saying, "If you got 5 minutes, I've got three candidates I'd like to show you that might be good profiles for the job," or here are the minutes from the last meeting, but not this kind of like tech data world, but more thinking of it as a gentle, like um, trained things with specific tasks that are then plugged into the community. And I think that's a harder space for like that 10 to 100 employee company to wrap their head around. So they're going to need support, I think, to get started. But once they do, now they're going to have the power to move much quicker, to your earlier point, than those big corporate entities that are so big that are hard to maneuver. So long story short, I think the big companies might start, but in a very small way. The small companies are going to start quickly and in a big way, and then the medium size, ideally, if they do start properly, they can really take over the world with new tools. That's the way I see
No, that makes a lot of
it.
sense. I mean, we've known for years that you can't, like with any technology, technology can't replace gaps that you have in your process if you don't really understand your process and if you haven't streamlined it and documented it. So you don't want to, automate something that isn't working, right? You want to automate
Exactly.
that is
Oh yeah.
working, enhance it.
You're so right. And it's so much, we could mistakenly add a ton of complexity to things because it's so easy to get data and it's so easy to get, it's similar to when it became easy to copy everybody on an email. Everybody got copied on all the emails. And so we're kind of like drowning in information. I see the same thing where people have automated like chatbots that come to their meetings and take minutes. And so then I end up getting copies of all of these minutes and and it's just more information than we need, because if you're in your meeting properly and you all agree on these are the three takeaways, these are the three action items, like I don't need to read some AI's version of that in addition to it. So if AI can kind of replace and simplify and optimize, great. But if it's just additive, then I feel like we have to be really careful. We don't allow a lot of noise into the system that we don't know what to do with. And we're kind
Right.
of there right now. I feel like AI is a
So much
bit
noise.
playful, let's say.
Those darn LinkedIn chatbots that keep pushing you around and trying to pitch you things, and it's not a human.
There's that too. There's that whole kind of like you don't know who to trust anymore. Yeah, no, for sure.
Exactly.
But when used right, it can be better than a human. It can be more personalized. It can be, there's things that it can do, but nobody's fully optimized it. Not, I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people are still in the early days
Yeah,
of,
still
of
early, which
trying.
means there's opportunity if it's still early. So it's
Oh, I think so.
yeah,
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 there's
great.
definitely opportunity, and the people that get it right are gonna really find themselves in a competitive advantage for sure.
I,
Exciting times ahead. Scary,
yeah.
but exciting.
Yeah, I heard someone made a comment about because I think the founder of OpenAI posted something about please stop saying or if you're saying please and thank you to the AI, you're actually consuming so many more compute resources. And somebody tweeted back, I'm going to keep doing it just in case the machines take over the world, just to make sure that I'm not on the naughty list. So.
Yeah.
That was
And
funny.
you know what? My point of view is be you. Like if you normally talk to a human saying please and thank you, build the relationship with the AI the same way because the day that you don't, it's going to know you're mad and it should know like, okay, this is, it's going to become more and more human-like, and its ability to interpret emotion is real. And so even when I asked it some sensitive questions about, there was somebody in my family that had a medical issue and I was asking questions and the tone of, because I speak to my chat GPT on my phone all the time when I'm driving. So its tone of voice like got very kind of like sensitive with me. And I'm like, whoa, like it knows this is like a heavy topic. So
Yeah,
I believe like we should just continue to be human and let it become more and more human, not us acting more like computers by forgetting to be polite
I
and
agree.
stuff.
Well,
That's
and it makes us use it more naturally, so it'll tend to
right.
flow within our workflow a lot better anyway. So,
Yeah. And
um,
now that being said, there's some people that don't say please and thank you, right? And so like those kinds of people, that's just they don't say it to anybody. They might as well not say it
be
to
direct.
ChatGPT, but
Exactly.
oh, it's interesting to see how this is going to unfold for sure.
So back to brand as a foundation before we digressed. What are your thoughts? So obviously any strategy, before you have to kind of understand what you're building on before you head off and go do something. And I think it's like the old ready, aim, fire rather than ready, fire, aim. So how does brand play into all of that?
Perfect. Yeah. So working in marketing and even having an agency for part of my career, brand has always been, an important part of that function. Um, but working with lots of different companies, I see there's two types of companies. There's the companies that believe that marketing, including branding, is an afterthought and something that you kind of do at the end. You sprinkle it on and you're like, polish it up and go sell it. And then there's companies where they treat marketing and branding as much more fundamental. That marketing and branding decides like who are we? Why do we exist? What reputation are we trying to create? What expectations are we trying to create? What product should we launch? What experience should we launch? How should we show up at every touch point? They see that as much more foundational, much more strategic. Um, and then branding and marketing become integral with the leadership team and everything kind of attaches itself to it. And I find those companies, the brand and the marketing can be way more useful because everything is authentic and everything is built on top of it rather than somebody launches something and then they try to tell a story because they think it's going to sell product. And sometimes that story then is not true. It's trying to compensate for something that they're lacking, or it's incongruent, or most of the time it just keeps switching. Like it's just every time they bring in a new ad agency, they find a new direction, a new design, a new story, and that sort of um, that long-term brand building doesn't take place because it hasn't been built at the founder level, at the fundamental level. And so that's one thing that when I'm working with teams is I let them know that that leadership team, which is often composed of somebody from finance and operations and different people, that they're all equally in charge of deciding like, what is this brand? Who do we want to be? Because it's not just the storytelling that we're going to do, it's the way we launch our products, the way they're packaged, the way we talk to people, the way we show up internally, externally. And so being super intentional about that brand identity is not only great for marketing because it, creates compelling and evocative storytelling. It makes sure that you're choosing, who's that core customer and talking to them in a specific way so that you're designing a product offering around a specific core customer, and then everything that you do is perfectly aligned with what's going to resonate with them. So there's this sort of continuity and consistency and let's say focus in that regard. but it's also super efficient in the sense that when your brand guidelines are clear, the decision making across the organization becomes so much easier. You don't have to ask yourselves the same questions over and over. You're very clear about what you should do because your brand stance will tell you, are you a value brand or are you a premium brand? Are you inclusive or are you exclusive? All of those sort of things there where there's no right or wrong become decided. And we're going to do this. So then when you're deciding how should we dress for the trade show, or what kind of paper stock should we use for our business card, or should we launch this product or this product, when you bring it back to like, who do you want to be and what reputation are you trying to create, it becomes crystal clear. Everybody's like, of course it should be that because this is our identity. And when the identity is not clear, people don't know what to do. They're like, I don't know. They see all these other competitors doing these great things that seem to work, and they're not wrong. They're just not them. And so having that sort of discipline and taking the time to make those decisions and say, this is it. We're not all of these great things. This is our, let's say, brand archetype, or this is our positioning. Then all of those decisions become so much quicker. And you don't actually need to get them approved because they're obvious. And I think that's the part that the leadership teams seem to light up around, the idea that it's not just about the end game is the storytelling, but fundamentally, let's make decisions very quickly, anchor to a clear brand identity where there's already a playbook written in terms of most of the decisions that you make. If you're true to your brand, it's going to be obvious which decision you should take. And so that's my thoughts.
No, I mean, there's several key points in there. One is that, yes, there's an initial investment to establishing your brand, but it's going to save you in the long run because you're not going to be going through all the churn of people looking for support on decision like that. They'll just know what to do. I think that's a really important point.
Right.
Obviously, brand is more than just a logo. That's what, I think there's a misconception there. And so that's really important as well. And having that foundation really determines your
Yeah, definitely not just the logo and not even just design. It's all of the other things that are part of the brand about really just creating an expectation in consumers' minds and then reinforcing that expectation or surpassing it each time. And that's how you're kind of building trust that when somebody buys something from that company or that person or that with that logo on it, this is what I can expect to get from them. And
It's
and
just,
yes,
it's
that's about
basically, it's like the
consistency.
visual representation of the meaning that you become emotionally attached to. So it's like,
Right.
it just helps with consumer decision making, and
Yeah.
well,
And sometimes the visual part, uh, I mean, the role it plays is it signals what to expect. It signals that, oh, because this is in a expensive packaging, it's probably going to be like this. But that doesn't necessarily, some people think that, luxury is great branding. I love Costco. It's one of my favorite brand experiences. I'm shopping in a warehouse. They check my receipt on my way out, but I love the experience. I know exactly what I expect to be shopping in a place that feels value, and everything is on pallets and they got these big baskets, and everything is then reinforced in terms of their product offering is always a great price. And so like the whole brand experience, because it's consistent and clear and all aligned, for me, that's perfect branding. It doesn't have to be like fancy bougie luxury branding. In fact, if they had any luxury codes within the shopping environment, I'd be like, wait a second, like, what's going
what
on here?
happened here?
Yeah, I
And then
want it
it
to
might
feel
change
like,
your perception of that luxury brand. Like, wait a second, what are
right.
they doing in Costco?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that the products aren't great. They're still fantastic products, but I'm shopping in an environment that I feel like, okay, this is good price. Got these big bright lights. I've got lots of space.
Exactly. Yeah, you know what to get.
Yeah.
So speaking of, Costco obviously is one of the businesses that typically would do well in a recession. And when we're prepping for the podcast, you and I spoke about other tactical steps that business owners can take today to recession proof their business. Let's talk a little bit about that.
To recession-proof their business. Um, I mean, the first thing they really have, like I was saying earlier, is just be careful that you don't pivot unnecessarily, that you don't panic, that you're really clear on what's working and what's not working, and being clear on their flywheel. So the flywheel meaning the way that they run their business in such a way that it will just kind of keep on spinning. And one of the things we do early on with teams is figure out what that flywheel looks like so that we're not tempted to kind of keep switching business models. And so if I go to my days at L'Oreal, for example, that flywheel was a cash-driven flywheel. We had to make sure that we had enough profit to be able to invest 3% in innovation, year after year after year, no matter how much sales grew, always 3% in innovation to create new products and new stories. And we'd have to keep 30% of our money in order to be able to tell those stories. And so 30% going towards advertising and storytelling. And that just worked. As long as we had enough money to be able to invent new products and tell new stories, the thing would keep on spinning and spinning and spinning. And you could never come up with a plan that didn't respect that 3% and 30%, or you'd be sent back to the drawing board, a cash-driven flywheel. But other flywheels, it could be, no advertising at all. It's just, let's say, referral-based flywheel, where your expectation is that every customer is going to tell at least one friend about you, and that's going to drive your next customer. And so for that, you're not, being super disciplined to make sure that you're generating enough cash. You're being super disciplined to be sure that you're getting fantastic reviews from all your customers, that they love you, that they want to stay with you, and they're going to tell somebody about you. And if that's the case, you just have to make sure that your business model is built in a way that you know that that's working. Have they told somebody about you? If not, why not? And as long as they do, your business just keeps on going and going and going. So when we really understand, what's making our business spin, then when recessions come or you have a scoreboard that shows that something is not working like it used to, you can like zero in on like which part of this flywheel is no longer working, and let's fix that. But let's not be tempted to completely change everything because of a recession. Um, and then, if there are things in the market that are shifting because of the recession, um, then decide, does it make sense for me to have an offering that's more aligned with where that consumer is at, either something that's less expensive or something with more value. But I would say being careful to not overcorrect, but if you correct, be sure that it's rooted in a real new opening, and avoid the temptation. This is probably the biggest thing I would say is don't blame the recession if it's not true. And so many companies I hear say, oh, well, our business is suffering because of the recession. And I'm like, really? Like, you have such a tiny percent of the market. Like, it's not, you could multiply 100 times and still not have 1% of the market. It's not like the market is shrinking. There's still so much more business out there. So, be careful that you don't blame the recession for things that are not really, you know, um, you're not that close to the market. If you've got a super tiny share of that market, the opportunity to get a bigger share still exists. Now, if you're a big player and you've got 50% of a shrinking market, it's sometimes tough and the recession becomes true. But for most smaller founder-led companies, it's not necessarily the case. So they then have to see, like, what is the opportunity in a recession to be
That's
able to pivot quicker than a bigger company.
that's a great point. So, and like brand, your flywheel is very unique to you. So don't just look at someone else's and emulate.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then once you decide on it, and or not just decide it, once you see that you've got something that's working, like, don't deviate, because that's working and you're going to get better and better and better at that. So if I go back to L'Oreal, that spending 30% in advertising year after year after year, you on an increasing business, so their profit and revenue grew double digit year after year after year. That means that 30% got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger year after year. So all of the media partners, sorry, let me take a sip. Sorry about that. All of the media partners were partnering more and more with them, offering them better and better rates, giving them the inside front covers of their magazines, giving them, first opportunities to sponsor new shows that came because they became a bigger player within the media space, and they got better and better at, knowing what works, what doesn't work, because they've stayed in the same game. They can really optimize and then leverage the economies of scale. Same is true with a referral driven flywheel. That's going to get easier and easier and easier. The more, if you're counting on your customers recommending your next customer, as you grow, the more customers you have, the more there's just people that are going to recommend you. So you just, when you know what the thing is that's driving your business, and then you put your efforts to being sure that flywheel, all of the steps are being reinforced, it should become easier and easier and easier over time. Um, It's when you kind of stop in that direction and you take a whole different direction that you've lost all that momentum that you've built. And so being kind of intentional and disciplined to know what that flywheel is, stick to it, and only optimize as necessary.
It sounds very simple, but double down on what works.
Exactly that.
Right?
Right.
So we're all going to get through this. Let's talk about growth, because I know that you have a model that helps business owners to identify three key pillars of growing their business. Can you talk our audience through that?
Yeah, so when we work with companies, first of all, we let them know, like as a leadership team, they have taken the responsibility to build three really, really important things that this team is going to build for sure. Number one, a business, which is the ability to create value and generate cash. So cash flow, revenue, profitability, all of the basic business metrics that provide the money that you need to grow the organization. That's one thing, the business. The second pillar that they're taking the challenge of building on behalf of the organization is the brand. And that brand meaning, like, who are you? Like we talked about, what do you want to be known for internally, externally? And so this team has to build a 100% strong, meaningful, relevant brand. And then the third thing that they're building, so a business, a brand, the third thing is a team. So they have to build this team, right people, right seats, but also happy, high performing. Are they being, brought to their full potential individually and collectively? And so then we want them to make sure that they're able to have a 100% strong business, strong brand, and strong team. And we do that where those three things intersect. And so where the business and the brand intersect, that's where we're going to find their strategy or their vision, figuring out where do they want to go and how they're going to get there. Where their business and their team intersect, that's where we're going to find all of the things around execution and driving momentum. How do you deliver on those things day in, day out, from meetings to playbooks to setting priorities, etc. And then where your brand and your team intersect is where we're going to find the culture. And the culture of the company is that unique environment that you're trying to create, aligned with your brand, matching the people, and in there that you can nourish the types of, the kind of trust and healthy dynamic in order to build, a strong business and strong team. And so it's business, brand, and team through strategy, execution, and culture. And then we want to get them to 100% strong in each of those six key dynamics.
Maybe it might be helpful to walk us through an example. I don't know if you have and without revealing anything, obviously, but a hypothetical services company, let's say, and what might that look like for them?
The business and the brand, or what how we would go about implementing it, or what an example of
Yeah,
of
like so
those
let's say
six
someone
aspects.
comes to you and they want to start working with you, and there's going to be some, I'm assuming, gap analysis against those key pillars. So like
Right.
where are you trying to get them? Like what does done look like if you're ever done
Right.
for a services company, let's say a law firm, for example.
Okay. Okay. So if it's a law firm, so business for a law firm, it's so first we would start by an assessment overall of where are you at with these sort of six things, and do they have a strong business? Meaning, are they making money, paying the bills, providing value? Like, is the sort of cash flow dynamic working well? That's pretty easy to assess, kind of financial metrics. The brand, what's the reputation out there? Are they known? Are they known for what they want to be known? So there's a kind of assessment in terms of how strong is their brand identity of that law firm. And then the team, that's an assessment of, do you have the right people? So in the firm, of course, there's the lawyers, and then there's all of the rest of the supporting team that are in there as well. Are they do they work well together? Are they the right people in the right positions? And so it's a sort of assessment on that team. So those are the three. And then in terms of strategy, it would be, everybody thinks they have a strategy, and they do in their own heads. They know where they think they want to go. Sometimes they haven't asked themselves some really precise questions, but they have at least a vague idea of where they think they're going, usually, but it's not always aligned. And so it's making sure that if you're a law firm, you want everybody in that firm to be saying the same story about where are we going? And, are we going to be twice as big a year from now? Are we going to be 10% bigger? Are we planning to be a global law firm? Or, what's the vision for this firm? And making sure that everybody is aligned with that same vision. So at the beginning, it's like pulling it out of the leadership team. and getting that on the table and saying, okay, is this it? 10 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now, getting everybody aligned time wise. And we also then would align on five W's in terms of strategy. So your why, which is your core purpose, like why does this firm exist and why should anybody care? Like there's a million law firms out there. Why do we need another one? What's unique about this firm versus you as an individual lawyer? And you as an individual lawyer, when you bring these together and create this firm and you hang this on the wall, like what's unique about you that's different than the other firms that are out there? So that kind of that why are you doing this? What makes you unique? That's the what. The who is who are you serving? You know, what kind of customers? Aligning on your ideal core customer so that you not only are reaching out to the right customer and consistently, you're designing your service offering around them. So if you decide that you're a law firm that wants to specialize in a specific domain, then make sure that you have the right lawyers to meet their needs, that you have the right processes, the right, whatever's required to design an offering and a service and a firm around that ideal core customer. And it's the ideal core customer, not all of their customers. Because what typically happens is let's say they've got 1,000 customers, and you say, yeah, but if all of them could be like who's your best one? Okay, like that. If they could all be like that, imagine how, it might be more profitable, might be more fun to work with, more predictable, whatever their definition of what makes them ideal. But if they can be really clear on what their ideal customer is, then they can all be intentional in terms of designing an offering around them and then meeting their needs, and then all of their marketing efforts can be focused on that ideal customer. So the why, the what, the who. The next is the where. So where are you going to be um, doing business? Is it just Montreal? Is it all of Canada? Is it North America? Is it the world? Is it so? How do you imagine your business growing? And that way you can design everything that you do with that in mind for this year, next year, and even 10-year outlook. And then the last W for the 5W for strategy would be your way. What's your proven process? So that comes back to two things. One, your flywheel that we talked about earlier, being really clear about what that looks like. And then your core values, the way that you show up at work, the way you work together. So their strategy or their vision would then be understanding their 10, 3, 1 Q. So their 10-year, 3-year, 1 year, and their quarter, as well as their why, their what, their who, their where, and their way. That's the strategy part. Then we would talk about execution and we would look at like their meeting process. Do they have playbooks? So things that they're doing recurringly. So not something that they do one time and never do again. Most of the work people do, they do kind of again and again and again, whether it's onboarding, whether it's bringing in a new client. Do they have a clear process that everybody's following for that, making sure that that's documented? And then setting some priorities. What do you want to focus on for the next 90 days? Like, what are those big things that you want to get done? Some kind of executional stuff to make sure that we've got momentum delivering towards that vision that they've created with their 1 year plan. And then the culture is really being clear and intentional about who, when you think about your best employees that work here, what is it about them that, made you think of them when I said, like, who are your best employees? That if all of your lawyers, let's say in this example, were like so and so, you could take over the world. Now, what is it about that lawyer that that you chose their name, and then you end up with a set of attributes, and they become your core values, and you say, yeah, these are the things, these are the behaviors that we want to reinforce, that we want to see more of. We want to hire people that match that. We want to fire the people that don't fit those core values. We want to celebrate people, acting in alignment with those core values, and reprimand or let go of people that don't fit that set of intentional core values that shape your culture. And so we sort of put those things in place so that all six aspects, your business, your brand, your team, your strategy, your execution, your culture, are all moving in the right direction, slowly getting better and better and better. And then we check in on that every at least once a year to be sure that everything is getting to 100% strong. Well, once it is, then we've got a whole next level of tools that we bring in to make sure that um, that they're not just strong, but they're kind of next level competitive advantage type strong as well. So that's
Yeah, I'm
probably
hearing some really good fundamentals in there. I'm also hearing some familiarity with EOS or entrepreneurial operating system. Are there aspects of that that play into this model?
There for sure are, and especially on the fundamental side, like EOS was a great, and I was a facilitator or implementer with EOS, as was the partner that put Boss 360 together with me, a fellow by the name of Shelby. He was the number one EOS implementer in Canada, top 10% worldwide. He had been doing it for many, many years. So big fan of EOS, as am I. But after facilitating it with it for a number of years, we felt that it was missing a little bit kind of the next level stuff. It had nothing really around brand or culture. It was tough to embed things like AI into it because it's kind of a bit, it's a great framework, but a little bit of a, let's say, really fundamental and rigid framework. And so Boss 360 includes all of the best stuff from there and then layers in some stuff that allow us, I guess, three things. One is bring some more current or up-to-date things into it. Number two, it allows us to tailor it and make it a little bit more curated based on the unique specificities of each business. Probably those two things, like the ability to curate and the ability to be a little bit more up to date and to evolve beyond the fundamental, let's say. But a great system. And EOS taps into some of the best business books, Jim Collins or Pat Lencioni, or so all of the foundational stuff. A lot of that is still very, very true across all businesses. But I would say that treats businesses a little bit like a one size fits all approach, whereas we love to uncover like the unique business model of each organization, and not to force fit them into a specific model. And so the work we do with them on Flywheel at the beginning is paramount for that, to really uncover like what is your unique way of your business working, and not try to have the same business model for all businesses. It's really leaning into what's working for them and doing more of that. And then stripping away the stuff that is not necessary, optimizing the things that are necessary but not perfect, but really based on what's working well and building off of
We'll
that.
call
But
it EOS 2.0.
yeah, could do that.
I have one last question for you, Ron, and that
Yeah,
is
for sure.
marketing and sales. So you've been a CMO. What do you look for in a head of sales?
In head of sales. So sales and marketing, it's funny. Sometimes um, marketing is seen as an expense, and they're seen as something that you do afterwards, kind of not necessarily the core, but more like this expense that we have no choice, but we have to do. Whereas sales seems to bring in the money, and so they're kind of looked at with two very different lenses for some reason. Whereas they're both quite similar in the sense that they're both trying to get work. They're both trying to get customers to, um, you know, um, if we say we want to get work, do work, and get paid, the get paid only happens when both sales and marketing are able to bring work to the table in order to provide value. And so the best companies and my best experiences have always been where sales and marketing work really, really closely and well together, and understanding how much we need each other, in the sense that marketing probably should know the end consumer inside and out and help design all of the product offering, the sales material, all of the storytelling components, but including the product itself, with exactly the end customer in mind, and be able to bring those things to light. But that has to be done from the input and feedback and collaboration and communication with somebody in sales who's oftentimes more close to the end consumer and has more insights and more feedback, and sometimes is even closer to the competitive environment that you're playing in. And so they have to like really trust each other and listen to each other, and then kind of come up with one unified solution, part of which is and maybe I need to back up, because it depends whether we're talking about B2B or B2C. They could be quite different, but and sometimes we don't have the same customer. And so if I take, for example, at L'Oreal or Keurig or some of these companies, marketing sometimes is more focused on the end consumer, and sales might be more focused on the retailer. So getting the product into the retailer's shelves. And ideally, they do that because the retailer believes that the consumer is going to come to their store to get it, because the marketing is so strong that we're going to be pulling the consumers into their location. But it's not always B2C, and it's not always consumer packaged goods. And in those cases, marketing and sales are sometimes talking to exactly the same person, but marketing is doing it in a bit maybe more um, holistic and storytelling way, and sales is a kind of more front, uh,
Or
let's say,
solution, like pitching whatever the solution or the product or whatever it is for that.
yeah, more frontline pitching and like a close proximity. And so you want to make sure that you're equipping them with what they need to succeed. But any organization where there's not a healthy friction between sales and marketing. Like if there's blaming, that's no good. They need to be like having a good friction, like tell me what you need, and then making sure that that there's a great collaboration. But in both cases, they have to have a real respect and trust of the consumer. Like, what does the consumer want? Who are they? Let's be excited about them and let's design, an offering around them so that the products almost sell themselves because we know them so well, we've listened so well. It's really just, meeting their needs versus pushing things to the wrong consumer. So if we can be really clear and intentional about who we're designing products for, the sales and marketing is a lot more fun because it's we're meeting needs rather than the opposite. And that's, I guess, the ideal scenario.
Well, Ron, you've shared so many insights, and I really appreciate you being with me today. I'm sure our audience is going to get a lot of value from this. If they want to connect with you directly, where can they find you?
Sure, you could find me on LinkedIn. So with my name, Ron Szekely, RonSzekely, or through Boss 360. So BOS360.ca. Either way, on LinkedIn or on the website, and we'd love to connect.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.